MTN walk-in centers, and agent locations.
MTN.
Studio, mics are up. And a good morning to you once more, Lagos. You're tuned in and listening to Smooth 98.1. Welcome inside a Freshly Pressed today, Tuesday, the 1st of May. It is Workers' Day, so happy Workers' Day to all of you out there enjoying yourselves and relaxing. Some people are at work, perhaps a little bit of light work going on today, just something light.
Something light.
Whatever it is that you're doing, I hope that you do it well and do it with passion in your heart. But joining Valentine Ohu and myself in the studio this morning, thank you very much. We have got Adedunmade Onibokun. Good morning, Adedunmade. How are you?
Good morning, Lagos. Happy Workers' Day. I hope you're enjoying the holidays.
Fantastic. Great to have you here with us. Now, Lagos, as we jump into our conversation for this morning, do know that we are up on YouTube streaming live right now. So you can go to youtube.com/smooth981FM Lagos, or you can simply just search for Smooth 981FM Lagos in the YouTube search box, and our page will pop up and you'll see the live stream feed there. Just click on it and watch live now. You can also catch the replays whenever you like and go back and catch up with all our different segments throughout the week or throughout last week as well. Now we're going to jump into our first set of stories for this morning, so we're going to let you deal with that, Valentine.
Exactly. So the first story we're looking at is on the pages of Vanguard this morning. Exposed how pharmaceutical companies aid abuse of codeine in Nigeria. An undercover investigation conducted by the BBC.
We're actually going to be doing the story from Thisday newspaper. We can't allow.
Skip that one.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll skip that one. Anyway, we'll come back to that later. Now, this next story from Thisday: we cannot allow continuous killings of Christians in Nigeria. It's a very extensive report brought in on the pages of Thisday on the heels of the visit of Buhari to the United States, to the Oval Office, and the meeting with Trump. It was quite interesting. There was a lot of coverage on it, in which we had details streaming in, where Buhari blamed the killings on militants from Libya, who he said, got really violent after the killing of their leader, Muammar Gaddafi. They came into the country and, riding on the heels of the herdsman crisis and killing innocent citizens of Nigeria. And this news also covered the delivery of the Tucano aircrafts brought in by the United States. He hailed the United States government on their cooperation to help end insurgency in the country. Adedunmade.
Well, what was quite interesting was the picture of Buhari and President Trump, and that smile President Trump had, I was like,
so concerning.
Yeah, when is Buhari signing?
Yeah, exactly. That was a concern of a lot of Nigerians.
Because Trump looked so accomplished in that picture, like, yes, I have accomplished my goal. But aside from that, apparently the meeting was very successful between the two leaders. I think their body language also shows that the both of them really get along very well, and they kind of gel, maybe because they're in the same.
Let's not assume. I knew we were going to go in this direction.
No, but hey, they seem to be chums at least.
I wouldn't go that far. I think Trump was just very pleased that after he made a foolish comment about S-hole countries, he finally got to meet with an African president, and they agreed on some things.
Well,
I think that's the summary of that.
Because he kept reiterating that how they see eye to eye, how they understand each other very well.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to say. That both of them get along, kind of, and they just might be chummy, sort of. Anyway, so their meeting actually centered on 5 things. Basically, the first one was security. On security, they spoke about the herdsmen, they spoke about Boko Haram, and they spoke about ISIS. They basically congratulated each other on their fight against terrorism.
Completing each other's sentences?
No, congratulated each other, and they completed the sentences.
Yeah.
I told these guys are chumps. Anyway, so on the issue of the herdsmen, I was quite surprised when Buhari blamed it on the fighters who left Libya after the death of
why surprise? The US military had already been saying that, and had been talked about across the Western African scape for months.
Yes, that it's there, but I believe that he also did not mention the homegrown reason,
Which is
the Meti what's that name again?
The Mieti Ala Cattle Breeders Association.
Yeah, and
you believe that the Cattle
no,
Breeders
no, no,
Association
no,
are
no,
responsible?
No. I'm not saying they
then
are
let's be very clear in our
I'm
words.
just saying that one, there's been some conflicts between them and the people and the host communities that they have been in, and I think this has a major role to play in what has been happening.
Well, the
so
Mieti
far.
Allah Cattle Breeders Association were of the idea that they were suffering from reprisal attacks from farmers and people in the communities that were being attacked.
Well, yes, and those people had to reprise because they were the first people to be attacked.
That's not true.
We
also have in the studio with us Kema Ufella Smith. A little bit late, Kema. Good morning.
Good morning, Folu.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, well, let's put that security one aside and the issue of the husband. The second thing they spoke about was trade. It's very interesting too because apparently about $6.07 billion worth of trade happens every year between Nigeria and the US. And apparently 4.16 billion comes from Nigerian exports, which is actually really great. Both presidents are looking to increase the number. And I was also interested to note that there are about 3 bilateral agreements. I'm sure there are more, but there are disagreements which I believe that Nigeria as a whole may not be taking full advantage of. This includes the Binational Commission, the Trade and Investment Framework, and the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act. So these are bilateral agreements that I would like Nigerians to know the provisions of and also see how much we can take from it. Now, they also spoke about governance and corruption and how the US is helping Nigeria to repatriate $500 million. And they spoke about humanitarian crisis. What was quite interesting was also to note that the US gives us about $1 billion yearly. And there was a comment by President Trump which stated that because they give us aid, they're entitled to some kind of reliefs or some, like what he said is, I'm pleased that Nigeria is, no. Anyway, it is somewhere in the story, but what he was trying to say in essence is that because they give us aid, that they are entitled to those reliefs that he was asking for. And I was thinking to myself, this is what happens when you go to countries with a begging bowl all the time, because they will feel entitled to some certain things.
He also mentioned the fact that that's Trump wanted to scale back the American supervisory role across the world while improving trade, which means underscoring the fact that trade is what was of utmost priority amongst other things.
Yes, Trump wants to sell us more planes and helicopters.
It's
basically
good for business, right?
It's good for it.
Although, another point to note is Buhari allaying the fears of Nigerians and Africa in general about the presence of the United States military in this part of the world, in Africa and in Nigeria precisely. He's saying that they're here to provide support that's crucial to winning the war on terrorism, and not necessarily to take over the government or security.
Well, they won't take over the government directly, but of course, I'm sure that they put into place some kind of influence on certain things, because I don't think that they're just here to help 100%. I'm sure that they're
provide
getting
tactical
something
support
back too.
and training.
Well, they are getting something in return too. So what is that thing they're getting? I think that's where our focus should be as well.
All right, thank you very much, Adedunmade. We'll come back to you, Kema, with this story on Vanguard. That's talking about the really the scourge of addiction on codeine in the country. From Vanguard, an undercover investigation conducted by African Eye, a new TV show from the BBC, revealed how leakages in the Nigerian pharmaceutical industry's regulatory system is aiding the plague of addiction to cough syrup across Nigeria. Now, the question comes on the heels of how large quantities of codeine, of this substance, the highly addictive opiates, really gets in the hands of addicts and some teenagers. Kema, would you go into this?
Yes, I'm surprised that we are surprised, and that's because when you follow a trend, you can easily see where this would lead. There are no actions without consequences. You just can't keep acting in a particular way and expect there not to be consequences. So now, yes, this is one of the consequences of relaxed regulations in your pharmaceutical and drug sub-industry. There are really no regulations there. You can walk into a pharmacy and order for drugs just as you would order for provisions. Okay, give me 2 Panadol. Let me see. What else do I want? Okay, yeah, give me cough syrup. and nobody will ask you any question. Like nobody. It makes me even wonder that, okay, is it that we don't even have, I don't even know if there are these codes in NAFDAC rules or, you know, pharmaceutical society rules where
in 2017, Kema, in 2017, the House of Representatives asked the national agency, that's NAFDAC, the National Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control, to immediately ban the dispensing and sale of codeine without prescription. Codeine,
my brother, that is codeine. Let's first of all look at the whole sector. First of all, we have a culture. You can walk into a pharmacy and get any drug you want to. First of all, so it now doesn't make sense to our culture and our psyche that just 1, 2, 3 drugs will now be regulated. You know, because the industry itself is not used to that form of regulation.
But it starts somewhere, right?
It starts with making it difficult for anybody to just walk into a pharmacy and get drugs. It just doesn't make sense. Self-medication, and that's why people die in Nigeria. Brief illness kills the most in Nigeria because it's headache. You buy Panadol. Nobody has given you any prescription. So that's where it starts from, and then it has been growing, and it has grown into this big issue. Now people are shouting. They are saying, why can't the pharmaceutical companies regulate these things? That they are aiding this problem. They're not aiding this problem. It's a question of supply and demand. There's a huge demand for this particular drug, and those people are simply supplying it. Now our regulators don't want to regulate these things.
Perhaps
for whatever reason.
This has started this conversation.
So it has brought up the conversation.
But sorry, we have to backtrack. I'm a bit concerned. How can you, or why do you say that the pharmaceuticals are not aiding this when they know why large quantities of certain products are being bought? How can you say that they're not aiding it?
The pharmaceutical companies don't dispense to users. All the pharmaceutical companies do is they supply their products
wholesale.
They supply these things to the pharmacy dispensaries, and those people, don't they have a Hippocratic oath? Don't they? Is that what they call it? Don't they have regulators?
But can't pharmaceutical companies, seeing as they do own the products, can also insist on seeing on accountability from the companies that they're selling to, whether they're pharmacists? You can ask and say, listen, are you making sure you're getting prescriptions before you hand these out? Let us see that.
No, that's fine. That's an ethical part. That's an ethical consideration. But look, in the UK, Pfizer will not do that because they have regulatory bodies that are responsible.
I don't think you say that they would not do that. I think a lot more companies overseas are more responsible and are more aware of, at least appearing to look responsible how people are using their products. So yes, they will take a certain role because it is in the public interest to take a certain role in that, especially if it is your product that is out there on the street.
Certainly, but I wouldn't, however, now
I'm not saying it's their responsibility entirely
to step up the ante. No, it's the government, because it's a major problem. It's an addiction problem. If there are some places you go to in the north, they will hawk it for you. You don't even need to go to a pharmacy.
Well, let's hope there's a new suggestion really that NAFDAC should actually develop a prescription database where they can track every single product that is purchased off the shelf. Could actually lead to an end of this this scourge.
Well, we've got a few messages coming in, and then I'll go over to another story. This is in from Mike the Great. He says Trump's meeting with the president is strictly for business purposes. The dude, I believe he's referring to Donald Trump there, is just doing everything to outsmart China in Africa. Fair enough. Do send us your messages to WhatsApp as well. 08. Well, you know what that WhatsApp number is. And we move on to this next story. Adedunmade, I'm coming to you for this. It's from the Guardian newspaper. Bello moves against AIDS over a failed attempt to recall Senator Dino Melaye. Now, according to the Guardian, and what looks like a lot of rumor and supposition, they say that sources close to Bello said that he was not taking the failed attempt to recall Senator Dino Melaye lightly and has threatened to sack various aides or coerce them to return mobilization funds given to them to facilitate the botched recall. Again, sources disclosed that about 200,000 naira, not that much in the scheme of things if you think about it, was earmarked for disbursement to petitioners in each of the 552 polling units where signature verification exercises took place, with each of the aides mobilized for logistics. Now, Adedunmade, I'd love your commentary on, again, the reporters and a lot of our news outlets also very much buying into this idea that it is sponsored by the governor of Kogi State, and of course putting out these suppositions or the sources. I mean, what's your take on this entire saga as it's unfolded?
Well, I have 3 major takes from this story. The first one is that the governor has tried so much not to show his hand. that is if at all he is responsible. But most people believe, and that is the word on the street, that he's responsible for this. Yeah, and at the end of the story, there's a government official who denies the fact that the government is involved and that monies were distributed. Now, 200,000 might seem a small sum to one person, but when you think of it in almost 24 or 25,000 ways, then you realize that this is billions of naira. Now, this is a state that is still owing salaries. So if at all this kind of money was doled out for the sole purpose of removing Senator Dino Melaye, then I think that's just a big shame, really, if at all that story turns out to be confirmed. The second thing that I've also taken away from the story is, this was the first time we ever tried to recall a senator in Nigeria.
Yes.
Now, what it just shows for us is that, one, it is possible, but it has to be people-centered. That's why there was a low turnout when it became the time to confirm the signatures, because I believe that at the heart of that recall, the people were not there. If at all the recall was really centered around the people, and it was actually the people that wanted Senator Dino out, then on that day, everybody will have turned out to confirm.
Do you truly believe so, especially when looking at whether it's voter apathy or the way that people go out or people talk about certain things and then don't show up to our voting polls? Because it would appear to me as though it's just consistent with the general attitude of a lot of Nigerians in following through. Also, another criticism that was levied against INEC, which they didn't really specifically address, was whether they kept reiterating the entire process and whether people in the entire area knew that they were supposed to come out for that.
No, people knew, and INEC.
We in Lagos knew, yes.
No, people there knew, I'm sure, and INEC did their best, to ensure that the process was transparent, and they tried as much to ensure that they confirmed this.
Yeah, but transparency and knowledge, because knowledge requires a lot of publicity funds, it requires putting out information, and INEC, we do know, are short-staffed and don't have a lot of money to spend right now.
But there were timelines stated for this, and there was a publication of these timelines. Now, I'm sure that it was in the dailies and these guys in Kogi as well.
The same way the land use charge was in there before it was thrust upon us.
Got the information. Really
I mean, am I wrong in this regard?
No, you're not.
No, I understand what you're saying, but I don't believe that this scenario also fits that statement that you made. For instance, now we've heard a lot about this recall process for majorly INEC. But have we really heard from the people of Kogi coming out to say,
do they understand what the recall process entails?
Of course they do, kind of, but so we do not see that, and that's why I said it was not people-based, which shows why it failed in the long run. So, and the third thing I was going to say is, I think that the Constitution put that, or the provision was put in place in the Constitution intentionally, that the signatures need to be verified, because when you look at the list, you can see that some of the signatures are the same for different persons. We just shares more light on the issue that this whole recall process was actually doctored. So I would like to see a genuine recall process by the people come up in the near future, and I think that would be more interesting than this story about Senator Dino's recall.
Thank you very much, Adedunmade. Next story is from the Vanguard. Perversion of Justice. How San bagged 30 days imprisonment. So Lagos State High Court, sitting in Ikeja yesterday, sentenced the senior advocate of Nigeria, San, that's in the name of in the person of Dr. Joseph Nwobike, to 1 month imprisonment for perverting the cause of justice. So Nwobike was, however, discharged and acquitted of 5 charges. In the judgment, Justice Raliat Adebi found Nwobike guilty and subsequently sentenced him to 30 days to serve concurrently. They say he bribed a judge, attempted to bribe a judge. Kema?
Yes, this happened. This happened here in Lagos, and it was done by an SAN, and the SAN has been sentenced to 30 days in prison. Like Adedunmade said earlier, he said that the person will then catch a thief. So it's because this is not something, what he did is not something that is quite alien within that field. People influence the judges. Some people influence the decision that's not necessarily the decision of their own case itself, but the judge who handles their matter. So some people wouldn't want a female judge, some people wouldn't want a male judge, some people wouldn't want a particular judge, or want a particular judge. So this guy got caught. The only issue I have with this case is that the penalty for the crime he committed under section 97 subsection 3 of the law under which he was tried, the criminal law of Lagos State, prescribes a 2-year imprisonment sentence, but he was given 30 days. Why that happened, I may never know.
You know, the 18 charges, 18 counts were preferred against him by the EFCC, out of which he only was found guilty for that particular perversion of justice.
Yes, that particular one carries a 2-year a 2-year imprisonment sentence. However, of course, you will now need to get to the details. It's possible there's a minimum sentence or a maximum sentence.
Exactly.
One would never know. But as to why the judge gave him the most lenient part of it, because this should serve as a deterrent. We're talking about purging an entire system. These are the little things that you should start with.
And maybe he got that judgment because he pled guilty to offering 750,000 naira. Anyway, so yes, after that, we'll move on to this next one. NAF, that's Nigerian Air Force, Monday took delivery of 2 Mi-35M combat helicopters from Russia. They were delivered to the Nigerian Air Force in Makodi, Benue State, from where they will be transferred to Kaduna. They'll be taken to Kaduna to be inducted as part of the 54th NAF in the 54th NAF Day celebrations. Thereafter, the helicopters will be deployed in conflict zones. This was delivered by Russia. It was received with cheer by the Nigerian Air Force. Kema, what's your take on this?
My brother, to be honest with you, sometimes Nigeria confuses me. Because today we are allies with China, hobnobbing with China, signing what do you call that thing, currency swap deals with China, saying that look, come and develop our country, and then the very next day we're in the White House. What was the word you said we're doing with Trump? Bromance, they were chummy, you know, and then, oh, US, we need your assistance, we can't.
But this goes beyond that. This is purely trade relations.
This is not trade relations.
This
is defense.
Helicopters.
This is
They've done
defense.
the first delivery. This is the
defense.
second delivery.
Now, when you want to get into trade as it pertains to your defense, you do that with your key allies. It's always done with your key allies.
But nobody says if you're friends with somebody, you can only trade with
So
them.
we are key allies with China, we are key allies with Russia, we are key allies with US. This is the most conflicting. Look, you just can't look at this picture and tell where your foreign policy thrust is. You just can't. It is just. I don't know of any nation that's, you know, dances with all these 3 people: China, Russia, US at the same time. It's confusing. Are you Switzerland? Like what exactly is this?
Well, why is that a problem for us?
It's not a problem per se. It just confuses one because it makes you ask yourself, who are you in bed with?
You mustn't be friends with the woman you buy tomato from on the market to purchase her tomato or patronize her.
If you're importing cell phones and all these things, then that's fine. These are people you are. I mean, because look, your foreign policy trust is key. Who your allies are, that's very, very key because it shows you the direction to which you're headed. It means it just says a lot.
Okay. Thank you,
Very interesting. Thank you very much for that, Kema. We've got a few messages we're going to jump into very, very quickly. Steve Obiako up on Twitter says there's no such thing as a free lunch. America isn't a charity organization. Trump just wants to protect America's interests in general. We've got Biggie from K2 who says this should be a war on illegal drug dealers. The NDLEA and NAFTAC should go after these people. Codeine and tramadol are on a high, and the president did well. He didn't leave room for controversy, although I thought he would say that the wives of Nigeria are not performing in the other room. Not that I'm using Big E. We've got more coming in. This is coming in from Ake saying that he's struggling with my views on the herdsmen attack. How come these Libyans attack communities and yet farmers are told to accommodate them by the government? Ake, again, it's about the narratives. We don't have time to go through it. Just read up on all the different opinions that are coming out. We're not saying that there are not some suspected or alleged herdsmen. And remember that all the reports are about suspected and alleged. Some people or some herdsmen are responding to reprisal attacks, so just be aware of that. But we do have to move on. This next story is about the organized labor. The NLC insists on September deadline for 66,500 naira, minimum wage from the New Telegraph. They're talking about getting up in arms and mobilizing the workers. I'm going to go to you, Adedunmade. What are your thoughts on this story?
Well, the federal government has said that the new wage will start to run from the last quarter or the third quarter of the year. And I see why the NLC is actually insisting that by September this thing starts to run, because Nigerians deserve it and we need it. With the cost of dollar, the rising in inflation rates, you know, we have so much we're coping with, whereas our pay has remained the same. So it's really important that the government and the NLC ensure, that is, they work together now to ensure that there's a meeting of mind between both of them and ensure that this new wage actually comes to fruition, because I don't want a situation where we have to resort to strikes and trying to bend the arm of the government before we can actually get this wage pulled out. Now, it now goes to the issue of, can governments afford it at this time? We know that there are some state governments that are still owing salaries till this time. So if we now increase the wage, that means that we're increasing their debt portfolio with regard to the salary. So I'm very concerned of that part too. I wonder how the state governments are going to come around this and how they are going to ensure that it is effected in their respective states. Now, what also concerns me in regard to this is the fact that our state governments are spending so much on infrastructure without actually focusing on building the capacity of Nigerians as a whole, and which still comes back to the saying that we need to invest in our people. Our people are our biggest resource, and not the oil or the natural resources that we have.
Very interesting. Thank you very much for that. I am still looking for the exact agreement on the specific minimum wage, but I do know the government had said and continuously said.
At the time.
Yes, because there are different codes that have been going around, so I still can't find any official reports confirming the 66,000 specifically, but they did say that before the third quarter, yes, they would review and have a new minimum wage implemented. But let's move on now. Kema, Lagos is to demolish 149 distressed buildings and plans to redevelop about 100 slums, from the Guardian newspaper. Now, it does say that they're trying to quell the spate of demolished buildings, because remember that at a time we had so many building collapses. They say that there's a next phase that's in session at the moment, or about to go into session, where another 38 of structurally effective buildings have been earmarked for removal, and they're imploring people to regularize their development. But Kema, how much of the responsibility is the state government to ensure enforcement of planning and zoning regulations that are already there?
Yes. So the Lagos state government wants to now demolish 149 distressed buildings, and yeah, like you're asking, is how much of the state responsibility is this really, or should we really focus on enforcing building codes? Yes, enforcement. I mean, to sound very soon, this horse that, if not dead, we seem to be overflogging it, that we just don't comply in Nigeria. Relaxed regulations. People just do whatever they want to do, and they'll get away with it. But they should know that you will not get away with it. This should not just be codified, it should be criminalized. If you build without the proper building approvals and you don't stick to the codes, it should be a criminal offense. Because you're putting people's lives at risk. But beyond this story, well, in the story, there's a second part that said that the state government is also to redevelop 100 slums. But unfortunately, the commissioner just, the story was reported, and just 3 lines were given to this next part of the story.
Which should have been the crux of it.
Which should have been the crux of the story, because I really wanted, because if you ask me, I think this would be the thing that would land any subsequent Lagos state governor a space in history. Any Lagos state governor that can do this, redevelop 100 slums, you would look. I didn't say this, but you might take over from Timothy.
Interesting.
Let's
Let's round up very quickly with this final story. Court orders interim forfeiture of Jonathan's houses. Adedunmade from the New Telegraph. The Federal High Court sitting in Abuja yesterday did grant an order on an interim forfeiture of 2 different properties, one in Maitama and another in cadastral zone A00, Abuja, linked to the wife of former President Goodluck Jonathan, Jane Patience.
Yes, it's quite interesting. Mrs. Jane Patience is back in the news, especially as regard to, should I say, stolen funds. But the story actually says that what the court has stated, or what the court has held, is that it is giving EFCC 45 days to conclude its investigations on the matter, and if it finds any foul play, to take the perpetrators to court. And if not, then the order will be forfeited, and the properties will go back to Ariwa by Ruera Richard Foundation, which it says that Mrs. Jonathan is one of the trustees. So let's see what the EFCC is going to do. Let's see if this is just a media trial, or if they actually have facts to support their allegations in this regard.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I do see several messages. I'm going to blitz through a couple. Coalitions from Ojo are talking about being pained. The president keeps blaming the dead Gaddafi over the killings in Nigeria as opposed to just owning his own failures. Henry Manuel in complete support of NLC's position on proposed minimum wage. And let's see, I think that's all that we can take at this point. Thank you to everyone who sent in messages. I'll see if I could just respond to a few things up on our YouTube page, but do stick around with us because coming up next at 8:15 we'll switch lanes and talk entertainment news inside of the Grapevine on Smooth 98.1.
The headlines.
Don't stop it. Okay, a couple of things to address in terms of questions. Okay.
What's wrong with it?
Yeah, what's wrong with having multilateral agreements with many countries? I don't see a problem. No, there's no problem. I mean, Kema, I think Kema's position is just simply most countries are very clear. Most developed countries are very clear on what side of the world they're dealing with. Although I do think with Trump's entry into the global playing field, it has changed a lot of relationships. We've seen North and South Korea come together. So I think that Nigeria is just taking advantage of that space. We do know that the Obama administration was not very friendly to doing work with Nigeria.
Absolutely.
We do know that the US has been trying to pressure Nigeria and other African countries into allowing certain things to go on here. I will say, at least for the entire Nigerian government that we've had for all their problems, we've been very firm in how we deal with the US and not allowing them to establish a military base here. For that, I will always be grateful. So keep fighting that. The person that said, Folu, your view on Miati Allah. No, someone tweeted at me. This particular person, my class online, you keep saying Miati Allah have owned up to the attacks. They keep defending or justifying why attacks have taken place. They're not saying that they're a terrorist organization. They have not said that they plan attacks. That is not true. So please just be aware. There are many narratives when we talk about, again, the president's owning up to or taking his
no, all those things are allegations and people are misconstruing information.
No, just hang on. It's not allegations, not even misconstruing information. You're just not looking at all the separate pieces. The style of attacks we've had across the country are all guerrilla warfare style attacks. You have individual cells that are carrying out these killings, and in different places, different communities are saying the killings are happening for different reasons. This person attacks here, we attack there, blah, blah. In general, what we say now, even though people are talking about attackers showing up in military uniform, is we just ascribe everything wholeheartedly to the herdsmen. Now, herdsmen ordinarily don't have AK-47s, ordinarily don't have certain things. What also the US military have said, and they've stated it many times over the past few months, is that they have noticed that across several West African countries and across several African countries, they have noticed an influx of former fighters that have been moving down to find greener pastures, and they're mobilizing people who are already discontent and who already want to fight. So it becomes easier in that way to create terror in certain places. Anybody want to add anything else?
Yeah. All right, guys.
That's it.
Great
Thanks, guys.
one. Pleasure.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.